And this comes from Kira, if I'm saying that right, it's Kira. And the question is just, can you explain why God, who you say is loving, would allow coronavirus? It feels very unloving. What would you guys say to that to start us off tonight?
Well, and that was from Kira, Logan?
Yes, I think so.
Great. And good to see you, brother, as well. Kira, thanks for diving right in and putting that right on the table, because it's hard to speak to anything in this season if we don't speak to this question first. So it's a very honest question, and it's exactly the question we should be starting with. And unfortunately, there's no easy answer. So we'll take a few minutes to open this up just a bit, but I want you to know, even as we get started, that we are perfectly aware of the fact that we will not be giving you a full and exhaustive answer to this question. And I know that if you wanted to discuss this more, you can always write in to the team. We would be very happy to discuss it further, as would other members of our team as well. But sort of viscerally, where I go when you ask that question is to a relatively recent experience when we had to take our son, Raphael, to the doctor. And at one point, they had to do some tests on his heart. And in order to do so, he had to have like 10 wires hooked up to his chest with these stickers on his chest. And at that time, he was under a year old. And so he certainly couldn't understand what was going on or why it was going on. And worse than that, my job as his father was to hold him down in place as these tests were performed on him that were uncomfortable or even painful. And I was crying worse than he was. But it struck me in that moment, looking at my young, small son, that we're in something like that position with respect to God. We can't, by the nature of how small we are and how young we are relative to God's level of understanding, always know why he might allow some of the things that he allows. And the incredible thing about that experience is that I was allowing this, I was even involved in it in some way, not because I didn't care for my son, but precisely because I did care for my son. And that would have been completely inconceivable to him. And yet there was truth in that. And so if Jesus has shown that he is who he claimed to be, if he has shown that through his resurrection, if he's given us reason to believe that he was really a divine person who was willing to sacrifice his life for us, and we can trust his goodness because of that, then sometimes we do need to be willing to live with the fact that we're not going to have a full understanding when it comes to some of his ways. That said, there are some interesting things for us to continue to reflect on. You know, I have been reflecting in this season about the brokenness of the world, according to the Christian faith. Natural disasters of many sorts, from diseases to earthquakes to tornadoes, they're not intrinsically evil in and of themselves. If you watch a tornado from a safe distance, it can be majestic and a beautiful piece of creation. If you look at a virus under a microscope, there is an elegance and a beauty to it. These things are bad when they impact people in ways that I believe that they're not intended to. If we didn't have viruses at all, bacteria would multiply so quickly and so quickly cover the entire earth that nothing could inhabit the earth, including you and me. So there's this delicate balance to the design of the earth. And part of the Christian story is that we're living in a stage of history where that balance has been broken in some way. And so what we're experiencing is not us functioning in the environment in the way that maybe we were intended to function in the environment. And if you think about a feral child, a child that is supposed to be in a certain environment, but is actually taken out of relationship with the child's parents and with all community, what happens is that the child is no longer able to function properly and in a healthy manner in the context of the environment that the child is in. Could something like that be the case with humanity as a whole? We have willfully taken ourselves out of relationship with the person we're supposed to be in closest relationship with, and who's supposed to guide our steps step by step, God himself. We're living outside of the relationship that we are supposed to be, is supposed to be most significant in our life. And could it be, therefore, that we're interacting with our environment in a way that is broken? One day, I think that won't be the case. And we have that promise within the scriptures that one day there will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain. And there's a beautiful detail in that passage which says, because God himself will wipe away the tears. That's not just metaphor. Jesus has risen in a physical body. He's a physical person as we are. And one day I believe he will physically put his hands on our faces and wipe away the tears. And so I believe, because of who Jesus showed he was, the fact that he sacrificed himself for us, we have great reason to trust him. I don't think that our expectation should be that we will always understand, but I do believe we can trust the promise as we look forward to a time where there'll be suffering no more. That's a hope that I have within my Christian faith. I'm not sure that when you turn to other worldviews such as atheism, that you find that hope or have reason to trust in it. But I believe we do have that in the Christian faith, and so I commend it to you. Thanks a lot for that question.
Just to say, because Vince probably wouldn't, but this is the area that he wrote his PhD on, and does have a book with Ravi on the topic of why suffering, finding meaning and comfort when life doesn't make sense. So if you want to, there's so much to this question, and if you want to take a deeper dive into it, please do check that out. But one thing Vince will sometimes talk about is the difference between goodness explained and goodness displayed. And I think the really hard thing about a pandemic like this is we don't get the explanations. We don't get to know why this pandemic right now, why is this happening? Some of you may have lost family members, and you're thinking, God, why would you take this person away from me? And we don't always get the specific answer to that question. We don't get it explained for us, but we do see goodness displayed, because, as Vince has been talking about, we see the love of a God who is for us radically shown in the person of Jesus. And we ourselves had a miscarriage last year and lost a child, and the devastation of that, of not knowing why our child, why did this happen? And yet at the same time, what comfort it is to me to know that out of everybody, God knows how that feels. He himself knows what it's like to lose his son, to watch his son die. And actually, they went through that for us. Jesus voluntarily went through that for us, because that's how much he loves us. So we may not always get the why explanations for why a pandemic, why this virus, why on this scale, but we do know there is a God who loves us so much that he has done everything to ensure that there will be redemption, that there will be healing, there will be that hope that Vince has spoken of. And I can remember the day that I miscarried, actually. Vince and I had already decided to call our child Luca, whether it was a boy or girl, because Luca means light. But we hadn't told anybody the name of the child. And the day that, just a few hours before I started miscarrying, a friend who I work with said, "Jo, can I just pray for you?" And then as she was praying, the words that she spoke over me were, she said, "Jo, God has put a light in you, and that light is never going to stop shining." And I was just blown away that of all the words she could have used, those were the words that she chose. And as she said it, I just knew with this core conviction within me that was true, that Luca, her light, or his light, would never, ever go out. Why? Because Jesus is the light of the world who stepped into the darkness. And even though the darkness surrounded him the way it's been surrounding us for so long, the darkness could not overcome him. And therefore we can trust that even in the midst of our pain, there is a way out, so that it doesn't need to overcome us either.
And just real quick, Logan, amazingly, end of that story, Jo's pregnant right now. We're due September 20th with a baby who never could have existed had Luca gone to full term, because this pregnancy started when Luca still would have been in the womb. So that's just one more example of, we genuinely believe that one day we are going to be in eternity with both of those children, one of whom could not have existed had we not lost the first. We never could have conceived of that or thought of that at the time. But sometimes when we live with God over time and we trust him that he is big enough and powerful enough and loving enough to resolve the narrative in the end, over time we see more of the explanation than we might have in the first instance.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much for being so vulnerable and honest. We understand that it's one thing to even share that kind of thing in front of a group of people, but to do that even virtually, I think we just feel your heart and your pain that comes out in a real way as you wrestle with this question, but also finds hope in Jesus and what he's done.